Hello, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to Satsang. Satsang is an ancient spiritual practice from India. It means being in reality together. I give Satsang live every Wednesday and Sunday night in Portland, Maine. This Dharma talk was recorded during one of our Wednesday night gatherings. Please visit jayakula.org to learn more about the teachings. You can find video satsangs on Jayakula's YouTube channel, and my books are all available on Amazon.com. Much love to you, wherever and however you are. I thought I would talk a little bit about how we actually can gain knowledge of our situation in ways that are not obvious. Because there's some teachings coming up where I'm going to be focusing on that. And sometimes people in the West, in particular, have very little understanding of how to gain knowledge or understanding of reality other than through rationalistic scientific methods, which are actually the worst, most slow and clunky methods. If you at all entertain the possibility that when I say reality is made of and full of consciousness and energy, if you're willing to actually meditate on that a little bit or think about that a little, and it's not just some sort of cute thing that I say, or you hear it, but it's kind of like, yeah. That's what happens. Everyone goes, What is consciousness? It is wisdom. Consciousness is not just, some gross existence of know-nothing existence. Consciousness has the capacity for self-reflection, and it's made of wisdom. Everything that you know, including all the so-called scientific knowledge, everything that you study, every book that you read, every fact and factoid that you come across, came out of this consciousness. It's all an aspect of this consciousness, producing gross and subtle and most subtle forms of wisdom. There's nothing that you can know, from the most obvious to the most exalted, that did not come from this one consciousness. All of that wisdom. So this is why we can have things such as Dharma texts, or Shruti as they're called in Sanskrit. Those are texts or teachings that are just heard in reality. So this is a very well-documented phenomenon where somebody who's a practitioner, usually a teacher, will receive a teaching like whole in one moment, and then will just dictate it from their own mind. And for instance, the Shiva Sutras were discovered this way. This is why Ma, who only went to school for 3 to 6 months, she says, out of her whole life, why she could just quote scripture and argue fine points of scriptural doctrine when she hadn't read those texts. Because those texts come out of this consciousness. So they are there to be discovered, not just in the printed page. That wisdom is there to be discovered in other ways. This may sound like a fairy tale to you, but it's not. I guarantee it's not. It happens even to little practitioners like myself. I mean, I've never gotten a whole book, but I've definitely gotten direct, spoken knowledge given to me, coming from nowhere, coming just out of reality. It happens. When you have a moment of intuition that pans out, you just feel, well, this is the right way to go. You are accessing wisdom more directly. So when we read a book, or we study engineering, or we do something like that to gain knowledge, that's the gross, clunky way. Just like when we try to figure out something when we're awake, that's more gross and clunky than if we're aware in our dreams and we can ask those same questions in our dreams with awareness. Then we're having more access to wisdom. In this tradition, it's said rightly that if you do sadhana in a dream, it's more effective than if you do it during your waking hours. Because when you're in a dream, you're not as limited as you are right now. You can actually be more limited in a dream. If you are just an average sleeper, you are going to sleep and you're being swept away by your karmic fixations. And you have very little will in your dream then. You can't make decisions. Oh no, forget it, I'm not going over there. Nope, you're going right over there. And this is akin to the bardas of death. If you have no awareness, then you die. You're probably all doped up on something. You have no habit of awareness, and you get swept away like a leaf in a wind. Right? Very little volition. But if you develop volition in your dreams and awareness in your dreams, then you have less limitation than you have when you're awake. I'm awake right now. I can't call up a certain environment and go walking around in it. I have to be in this environment. I can't just decide to be on Pluto. But if I'm in my dream, I can. If I have a certain amount of awareness. If I'm in my dream and I have a certain amount of awareness, I can ask a question that I want an answer to. There are well-established ways of accessing knowledge that is less limited and accessing it in a more direct way that everyone who is established in a more traditional practice of one of these kinds of spiritual lineages, Tibetan Buddhism, lots of different kinds of so-called Hinduism, Taoism, Dzogchen, all of the masters of those traditions use various means to access wisdom that we don't have access to generally when we're just walking around living our regular lives. We can learn to have access to it, but in general, we need some tools to access it. And what are we doing? We're simply accessing that consciousness in a less limited way. We're not accessing a different pool of knowledge. Algebra and teachings in a dream come from the same consciousness, right? There's only one source. So we are just, when we're using certain tools, learning to access more directly a less limited understanding. Those tools are things such as divination, astrology, and dream practice. Every culture has its forms of divination, and I'm not going to be teaching divination this year. I've taught 3 cycles of divination already, and I'm not going to do it again soon. But in 2015, I'm going to be teaching dream yoga and Jyotish, astrology. It's important to understand what they are. What do they represent? They represent the tools that every serious practitioner uses on some level to try to figure out what is the best way for me to move in any particular situation. What is the way that encompasses the most wisdom. If I am just sitting here, with my normal backpack of crap, it gets in the way, it gets in the way of me seeing clearly. But if I have a tool that I know how to use, then I can kind of piggyback onto that tool and get more clarity about a situation. That kind of insight that one needs. And the whole purpose of these tools is not to predict anything. That's a really infantile way of using the tools. There is no such thing as accurate prediction. There is only an eternal presence. And it is in complete call and response situation with itself. And what we are doing when we use these kind of tools like divination and dreaming and Jyotish or some other kind of astrology, if you like, is we are reading the potentials of the present. So that present is made up of different aspects, but one of the aspects it's made up of is patterns of consciousness and energy, aka karma. The reason it looks like things are being predicted is only because certain patterns are so strong that they are near inevitabilities of ending up some way, right? But other patterns are weaker and have very little inevitability. And then there are, what are called cracks in time, where a door opens and there's no karma and you can walk through it if you can divine the moment precisely. Even when we have a situation of very limited possibility, there is always better ways to move in it and worse ways to move in it. There is no situation in which free will does not have some possibility to make a choice of how to move that will give you a better result. So even when you hear astrologers, for instance, talk about fixed karmas, there's nothing fixed about any of this. It's only relatively stronger. A fixed karma only has relatively more momentum than some other karma. Harder to change, perhaps, but using these tools, we can receive instruction as to how we should move in any situation. So there is no prediction because every moment is arising fresh and new, and there is always a lot of possibility in every moment if we can find that possibility. And that's what these tools give us. They help us to find the possibility for having a result that helps us to move to a position of more freedom. The really interesting thing about using these tools is that they are in and of themselves gurus. When you apprentice yourself to something like divination or dreaming or astrology, you are apprenticing yourself to a master. You are being communicated to, just like the teacher communicates to you. And just like the teacher communicates to you, you have the choice of whether to listen or not. And you also have the choice of how well to listen. And you have the choice of how thoroughly to listen. You have the choice of how much to give up surrender your own compulsions in the moment. Because what happens is someone starts to use these tools, and if you're very compulsive, you have a lot of karma, it's much more difficult to use them because you're not going to listen well or follow well. But apprenticing yourself to something like dreaming or divination or Jyotish means learning how to follow. It is a process of surrender. And what you are following is wisdom. You are following nature. I've learned as much from doing divination and astrology and dream practice from those practices as I have from my teachers. I would say 90% of whatever patience I have comes from doing those practices. Because if you're like me, and a lot of people are in this sense, you want everything to happen very quickly. And when a big set of circumstances is being orchestrated, it often doesn't happen quickly. And all of these disciplines are helping you to find the right moment to do something. So it's not just the right thing to do, but it's the right moment to do or not do something. And I would say most of the time when you're following one of these disciplines, one of these wisdom traditions, you have to wait longer than you want to. Yeah. And I'll tell you something, at first, at least for me, it was excruciating to continually be told to wait. But then eventually, after years and years, I realized that patience brings enormous freedom. When you are freed of the compulsion to act, this enormous spaciousness arises in your life. You actually can pick your moment. You don't have to follow that anxiety that's telling you to go, 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 go. Right? Yeah. So, dream practice is actually several different kinds of practices. It's not just one thing. Most people associate dream practice with lucid dreaming, just being awake in a dream and getting to do stuff. And that's only a very beginning kind of dream practice. But dream practice has a few different purposes. It is one of the most important things to learn in the entire tantric tradition, because it prepares you to die. And we all want to live well, but we also want to die well. Right? So dream practice is preparation for learning how to maintain awareness while you're going through the death process and beyond. It is many, many other things also. I mean, it can be used to get teachings, to do healing. All kinds of things can be done in dreams that are more difficult to do in your everyday life. So in the teaching that's coming up this weekend on Saturday and Sunday, I'm going to give an overview of all the different kinds of dream practices that I've learned, and also some basic pro formas for how to do those practices, some of which will be way too advanced for almost everybody who comes to the teaching, but you'll have it. You can start with the more beginning practice. There's a very good beginning practice, and then other things you can do. It's kind of sequential, and you can get to the more advanced practices when you're ready. And then the Jyotish teaching will start up in February. This is the first time I've ever taught a full kind of introductory Jyotish course. My teacher actually asked me to do it. I have given a shorter teaching on the Panchangam and the Nakshatras, which are the Jyotish, the Vedic constellations. But the purpose of this teaching will be to give non-astrologers some basic tools you can use in your everyday life. It is not going to teach you how to read people's charts. That's not possible. I mean, that's a many-year study, and you have to have the adhikara, the capacity to do that. But it will teach you to understand some basic things about your own chart, and you'll understand a lot about astrology and what it's for and why it's useful. And then I'll give you some practices that you can do every day using the Panchangam, which is the Hindu calendar. That's how I actually started learning Jyotish, was through the calendar, and it's a really fun practice to do. That course is going to go on for 8 months, once a month. I forget if it's on a Saturday or Sunday, but you can check on the calendar. Yeah. So these are tools that can really enrich your sadhana. They have certainly enriched mine immeasurably. I mean, I count divination as one of the very most important things I've ever been taught. If I think of what my life would be like without divination, the horror of the bad choices I would have made. So, and also what I wouldn't have learned. I've also been studying Jyotish now for quite a number of years. And I can't say that it comes as naturally to me as divination does. But certainly it's a wonderful tool, especially for kind of getting a fresh framework for your life. And definitely the directness of the Vedic calendar, the Hindu calendar, in its relationship to what's actually happening in the stars every single day is very important to get in touch with. And it's great in Maine, too, because you can actually see the sky. You can see what's going on. So this is a great place to do some astrology.
That's how we ended up here, too.
Yeah, we ended up here through astrology. The basic premise of all of these wisdom traditions is that you are being communicated to by this, your own consciousness writ large. And you are living, as one teacher said, I've always loved this phrase, in a theater of communication. That's what duality is. It's a theater of communication, where this one consciousness gets to have the fun experience of pretending that there's lots of us here. So what happens, we have to learn how to read those communications. We're illiterates, right? And there's so much rich communication happening everywhere, in every moment of every day, and getting, if nothing else, Jyotish sensitizes you to that. One of the big branches of Jyotish, there's several different branches of Jyotish is omanology, reading what are called nimitta, signs. And that's a super fun thing to study. I learned divination from a Taoist teacher, and he taught us how to use crows for divination. And all of this stuff is just so much fun to play with. And it gets you sort of in touch with the world and relating to just everyday happenstance in such a richer way. And you feel so supported, and you really get it that really wisdom is just trying to help you, even in the bad times. Jayakula is a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. We are based in Portland, Maine and Portland, Oregon. Visit jayakula.org to explore more of our offerings.